Hello, everyone. Welcome to session 5 of Data Science for Trading and Trading Professionals and Risk Managers. In this session, we're going to build on some of the learnings from the previous sessions, and then I'm going to basically show you a example of a web app that can be created using R and R Shiny, which is an addition to effectively as part of the RStudio family. It's a tool that would allow you to basically take your R applications and deploy them online as web apps. In many ways, the whole process is rather simple, and there are lots of examples that you can effectively build on to deploy your R applications as web applications, and the technology behind it is quite robust and sophisticated. So in many ways, even though it looks fairly simple in terms of the mechanics of developing web applications and deploying them, but in reality it is a fairly robust web application that you can do quite a bit with. So in many ways it helps you at the beginning because of all the functionalities. It helps you to kind of get started, and then there's a lot of scope for further development, and this whole ecosystem is developing quite rapidly as well, with the integration of a lot of the JavaScript tools and projects that are quite active on the web. So in this session, I'm going to basically cover a few topics. I'm going to introduce the concept of reproducible analysis using the standard that's called R Markdown. It's effectively a R rendition of a Markdown sort of Markdown standard of writing documents and deploying them online. I'll show you that you could basically use this to generate or to write your reports as a risk manager or trading analyst. I'm going to show you a very simple I'm going to give you a very simple introduction to creating shiny apps. I'm going to use the standard template that comes from RStudio, and then finally I'm going to basically take one of our examples or some of the visualizations that we have done in the past and create a web app to demonstrate to you how this can be done in practice. So kind of in this first session, I basically introduced this our IDE, and over the past few sessions, this is the interface that you have been looking at. And if you don't have this installed, it's actually in order to follow this example, you actually need RStudio because of all the integrations with the Shiny package. And then I'm going to basically, as I go through the example, I'm going to introduce to you links and further learning that you can do, which is mainly self-contained in the RStudio Shiny website, which has tons of resources that you can basically use to build your applications. So kind of a very brief overview. That over the past few years, in fact, since I started R, there has been a convergence of web technology into documents and into effectively R scripts. So in many ways, a lot of people, a lot of data scientists, and in fact, myself, as working as both risk manager and trading in the trading analytics capacity, I've basically used interactive documents to generate my reports. And if some of these reports become tools that people want to use to do exploratory type of analysis, kind of taking them and putting them online as a Shiny app. So the sequence of basically work activity is that I basically go through the process that I demonstrated in the past few sessions in terms of fetching the data I need, doing data cleanup, doing some sort of visualization, creating a model, and then documenting that in a report, which some of those reports make its way into a web app, which then you can basically put that and make it robust enough to actually have it as a tool that people can kind of use on a daily basis and come back to it. Things such as risk reports, or even some of the market analytics tools, looking at price dynamics. These are the type of things that you can use Shiny app to basically have there and basically help your team to do more sophisticated analysis. So usually the starting point for everybody that kind of gets started with that is creating a report which is called R Markdown. So if you go to your RStudio IDE and under a file, you can effectively create a R Markdown document from a template. So here you basically have a you need to name your document. So here I basically say session 5 test. You basically then you have a choice of whether you want this document to be HTML, PDF, or Word. You don't necessarily have to worry about this too much right now, because you can effectively later on decide how you want to render that. So you basically click on that. A new document gets created. So this is a test document, which is a template that's generated by RStudio, and it effectively has few things that is kind of noteworthy in terms of things to note. There are lots of documentations on R Markdown. If you Google it, you can get a whole bunch of stuff from RStudio website. But here, few items to kind of get you started. So the beginning of the document is the document header. This is effectively it doesn't get shown in the main body, except the title, I believe it would get shown. And then you have these things that look a little bit highlighted. These are chunks. And chunks are effectively chunks of code that you can either show or hide from the users, but show the results of it. So there are a few functions within that, within that curly bracket, that you can effectively specify the type of actions you want this to basically take. In this case, for example, here's the chunk is called setup, and then the include flag is set up as false. So it's when this document gets rendered, it does not show in the result. So you can have free format text. These are basically different headings. So you can have the first heading with one hash sign, and then 2 hash sign is the second heading, and so on. So the syntax with R Markdown is quite standard, format that you can basically look and it's very similar to Markdown, and R Markdown is a variation of it. So here, you can basically this is a test data set. You can create a output the summary of the numbers, and then you can also do a plot. So in order to render this document, you basically knit this document into an HTML. So here what I can do is I need to save a document, so I basically do test, and document gets generated. And after a few minutes or seconds, depending on the size of your document, here is what you have. It's a HTML document. It's a static document at this point, but nevertheless, this is could be a replacement for the reporting that you do. You can also, at this point, as I mentioned, that you don't have to worry about the format of that document. You can basically decide at this point to basically generate this document into different formats. So if you click here, there's a down arrow. You can knit this document into an HTML, a PDF file, or a Word document. So for example, here I'm going to go ahead and try the Word document. So the Word document got generated. Now it asks me to fetch the file. So if you're working from a Windows environment, it's probably easier, and the document basically would show up more effectively as a Word document in your browser. So here, my Office Live is trying to open this document. So for the sake of time, I'm going to kind of move on, but take my word that this actually works. So the second example that I want to show you is a Shiny web app, and this is a more interactive version of R Markdown, and there are certain features in it that is different. So if we go ahead, and I think I did that a little bit too fast, but I'll show you. So if you go to File, generate a new file, here instead of R Markdown, use Shiny web app, and basically name it to anything that you want. So in this case, I basically call it test2. You can create it as a single file app or multiple file. This is a bit of an advanced feature, and when you actually get to create these web applications, there are some pros and cons in using single file. A single file is easier to look at, and multiple file is easier to deploy on a Shiny server. So you can go ahead and create a single file. So in many ways, there are few things about this that are kind of interesting to look at. And the first thing is, the library that you require is Shiny library. You need to install that on as a package in R, as as pretty much all the packages that in the past that we installed in the past few sessions. And then in a single file, what you're going to see is effectively two variables. So if you basically chose the two file option in the previous step, you would have seen two files. One is called UI.R, the other one is server.R. In many ways, the way that you want to think about that, the name is pretty descriptive. UI is your user interface. This is your HTMLs and your JavaScripts that you have in your web page, without actually kind of going into the detail of it and building it from scratch, because R has basically wrapped that into R functions, so you don't have to worry about the mechanics of it. But in effect, this is your user interface. On the server side, these tend to be your R functions that would do certain things. Plot a graph, create a model, do a forecast, and things of that sort. So you effectively, what you need to do in this case is you basically, the first step is to create all of these applications and put this logic code, and then wrap that into the server portion of your function, and then basically have it rendered into a web application. So the UI side of things is quite straightforward. You basically have a setup that you need to follow. This is very well documented in a site that I'm showing you. It's under Shiny. You can look at the tutorials. That's gonna get you started around how to build a Shiny app. They're quite easy to follow. It kind of goes into a great detail of how to do that. You can basically, the other useful link in this site is references. So you can basically go ahead and take any of these objects, and let's say, for example, if you want to create a checkbox input, you basically click on checkbox. It tells you the syntax that you need to follow to create that checkbox. And if you have previous knowledge of HTML and specifically Bootstrap, it is quite handy, and you can basically see what each of these objects mean in a Bootstrap sense. So you can basically look at the code here and make sense of it. But in reality, I mean, your UI side is quite straightforward. In fact, this is nothing but a HTML page that gets created. So if I run Shiny and then I run UI, and then if you look at the variable UI, I'm going to expand this so you can take a look at it. This is effectively a Bootstrap interface. So you can basically copy and paste this into your browser, and you would see the exact same interface that shows up in your app, except that it doesn't have, obviously, it doesn't have the functionality on the server side. And then on the server, it's basically a some syntax around how to render certain things and pass it back to your UI, and then sandwiched between that is effectively your R functions. One thing to kind of note is that this naming convention, for example, and what you need to be aware of is how you name these different variables on your UI and server side. It basically provides the connectivity and the link between what you want, what you're plotting in the, let's say, on the server side, and what you want to show on the UI side. So I can go ahead and run this example. It's a fairly simple example. You can basically click on a button that says Run App, and then it basically generates the app for you. And what you're going to get at the end of it is a web app. Depending on your setup, it could be fast or slow. But in this case, it's a little bit slower. That we need to wait for a few seconds. I'm going to go ahead and open it in the browser to make it a little bit faster. Yeah, so this opened up in the browser, and as you see, it has the interactive feature that it changes the number of bins in a histogram, and you can see how it how that button effectively tells the R function on the server side to do a certain thing and bin the data in a certain way, and you basically have that interactive functionality. In the example that we had earlier, so I'm going to close these. In the example we had earlier, we effectively looked at the prices, CAD, Bitcoin to CAD and Bitcoin to USD prices. We rendered that as a JavaScript, interactive plot using dygraph. And the other example that we had, which was not interactive, so the first example was quite interactive because it used all the JavaScript on the browser. But the second example, which was looking at the relationship between the CAD to Bitcoin prices and USD to Bitcoin prices and having the distributions on the side, that wasn't interactive because, as I mentioned, that used ggplot, which is a static sort of plot, and it did not allow us. So, in order for us to change, for example, if you wanted to look at two completely different variables, we needed to basically rerun the example and kind of, do that manually. So in many ways, you can do this quite interactively. In fact, the document that I'm kind of using to for this presentation is a R Markdown document, but it has Shiny interactive components embedded in it. So you can very easily create that. If you go to under New File, go to R Markdown, and here on the left-hand side, you can basically get different options. If you choose Shiny, you can actually create a Shiny, either a Shiny document or a Shiny presentation. Shiny presentation is more like a slide deck, but Shiny document is a R Markdown with Shiny interactive features. So which basically gives you the ability to embed drop-down menus and checkboxes and so on in your documents. Then you can basically, as I'm going to show you, deploy these documents online as a web application. This is in many ways the first step in creating Shiny applications. Instead of kind of going through the Shiny app route, you can effectively and efficiently do this and have simple documents deployed as interactive apps. So if I go ahead and run this document, so it's rendering the document. It usually takes few seconds to a minute to actually do that. So there we go. Here we have the document. This is basically the beginning. All the points that I made during this presentation. You can have that as documents with proper headings, and you can have bullet points. You can also show your code, embed your code, or actually hide it in the case of if you want to create this as a app. So the first plot, it was basically the time series plot of prices in Bitcoin prices in CAD and USD, and that was effectively interactive to begin with. So by embedding that into the site, you can effectively have that and deploy that. But this is on the browser side. This document is interactive, which allows you to change the ranges and so on. However, the other plot that we had was this plot, which basically showed the relationship of two variables with the distributions on the side and a cloud sort of the point plot. which the colors represented different years as factors. So in this case, what I did was effectively if you look at the code from in GitHub, you'll see that I effectively created input variables, and the input variables are effectively the name of the column names in the data frame that I had. So if I go, in this case, if I go and choose a different value, for example, looking at the USD prices versus price returns, what happens, the sequence of event here is kind of important to kind of make sense of this whole process, is that when I select something here, it triggers a chain of event. From the input side, it basically that value gets trickled down onto the server, and on the server side, depending on the logic, it basically triggers a certain thing. For example, in this case, I'm filtering by a price USD return instead of a previous variable. Then it goes and renders that plot, and the plot gets piped back into the user interface, which then shows that on the screen. So this gives quite a interactive capability here, which basically allows the user to effectively create their own story around the data. In many ways, this is kind of small incremental work from your end, but in terms of the impact of your analysis is quite significant. It is fairly easy to do this, and it doesn't take a whole lot of time to actually put these things together, especially if you kind of look at them in do them in small chunks, and then there are ways to kind of integrate them together later. There is a fantastic site, or it's actually a project that is part of family of RStudio projects that you can take a look, and it's called Shiny Dashboards. And this kind of gives a very clean interface to your reports, and you can effectively create very, very professional looking dashboards which has components of your apps in them. And the other source that I want to basically point out is that if you want to actually learn a little bit more and create effectively websites, or create web apps that have that can leverage off our applications, you can effectively do that separately and create the web app, and then link that to our functions on the server. In fact, these can turn into full-fledged web applications that are quite powerful and do things that are you would think it's in the realm of websites and all of these more sophisticated web tools. But however, R is fully capable of to get scaled into something that's more professional, and that can do quite a heavy lifting in terms of analytics and in terms of risk and trading tools, basically. In order to, so one of the things that you could do in terms of deploying your applications, there is a shinyapp.io, which is effectively a free site that's provided by RStudio. This is a public site, so if you have confidential data, you can't really put that there. So in many ways that limits that for us as risk managers and trading professionals. But it's a good demonstration tool. Maybe you can kind of use that to test out some of your web apps. The method that I use for deploying my applications is that I actually have installed Shiny Server on a cloud node within the company firewalls, and effectively, in order for you to deploy these, if you have the correct setup, it's as simple as copying and pasting your application into a folder within the Shiny server folder that gets served to the users. Then, for example, that Shiny application can be served on a URL. I mean, this is obviously on the public cloud, but this could be, your companyname.com, Shiny app / in this case session 5. So this is actually a web application that's deployed, and anybody can effectively use that and run it at any time. So this effectively ends the session 5, developing and deploying Shiny R and Shiny apps. And this effectively ends the 5-session series of data science for trading professionals and risk managers. I hope you enjoyed these sessions, and I'm keen on getting your feedback and comments. And if you have any thoughts, and if you want to reach out, please do so. Thank you very much, and goodbye.